That was depressing. That was a depressing game. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken lose 5-2 to the Minnesota Wild, one of 4 or 5 teams that they really need to be beating in this wildcard race if they want to get into the postseason. But instead, they actually get off to a pretty good start for a couple minutes, and then completely unravel until midway through the third period when the game is completely out of hand. And I could be angry about this one. It really does have all the makings of a classic rant style game where I don't even bother wearing the jersey after the fact and I go off on the Kraken for not trying or just playing a sloppy, lousy game against one of the opponents they really need to be beating. Not that, again, there's any game in the rest of the schedule that is an important one, but of the games that are important the rest of the way, this is one of the few that is the most important because, again, it's against one of those teams you're in the wildcard race with. Which I suppose, while we're on that subject, the one sliver of good news for the Kraken is that while a lot of the other teams that are in that race, like the Flames, the Predators, the Kings who are in a spot, and obviously the Wild beating the Kraken, all won tonight and either made up ground or distanced themselves from the Kraken, the team that they're actually trying to catch in the Blues did lose, so at least it's still a tight race, but again, this is the type of game where the Kraken couldn't afford to come out and lay an egg like they did for a solid 40 or 50 minutes of this game. But in the end, while I could be angry at the Kraken, and there is a part of me that is, especially considering they've now tarnished those fantastic Winter Classic jerseys with whatever you want to call this game, even with every reason that I could have to go on that rant and turn this video into one of those that just lays into the team, I'm just not there right now, and I try to be at least genuine with that. Sure, maybe I play it up a little bit for the camera so it's a little bit more entertaining to watch, but those feelings are genuine when I go on those rants, don't wear the jersey, and lay into the team for whatever deserving reason there is at the time. Like, for example, getting shut out on the road against one of the worst teams in the NHL. For whatever reason, though, with this game, I'm just not there. For what it's worth, the team and Hackstall in particular do seem like they're there. Hackstall in particular, I mean, there's very few times that I've seen him more clearly upset than after this game. Now, obviously, as he always does, he still kept the interview pretty buttoned up and professional after the game, but the body language and tone of voice behind those answers was clearly a man that wanted to be letting loose a little bit more, certainly with the words he was choosing to describe how the Kraken played that game and how they should be feeling as a team after that performance. So I can pretty much guarantee you that, while the quotes from Hackstall after the game, if you just see the text version, do seem a little bit demure and tame compared to certainly how a lot of fans are probably feeling after this game and that performance by the team, whatever he said to the team before media was allowed in and the cameras were turned on was certainly a lot more aggressive and to the point than what he said to the media, which obviously has to be toned down a little bit, or at least for him, that's the way he tends to approach it. Whether or not the team responds to that and bounces back with a better game against the Bruins, we'll just have to wait and see, or the rest of the season for that matter, especially with some tougher opponents coming up over the next couple of weeks before the schedule lightens up, like I said before, in kind of the middle of March with really some terrible opponents at that point. Of course, by the time the schedule lightens up, we're already, I think, past the trade deadline, so these next couple of weeks could make a big difference to whether or not guys like Schultz or Wemberg are still a part of the team when the schedule does get lighter. And at least for now, although I know there's going to be a lot of people in the comment section that would like to start the discussion right now, that's as far as I'm going to go with deciding whether or not the Kraken should be sellers at the deadline at this point in time. I'll wait at least another week or two before we really can make that decision, and the team obviously will do the same, as that's the right call to make. Obviously, the outcome of this game is going to make a lot of people want to be sellers at the deadline and trade some of those guys that are UFAs at the end of the season away to get something in return. But like I already said, the outcome of the game previous against the Canucks makes you want to jump right back on the bandwagon of the Kraken making a deep playoff run. So we'll just wait and see what team shows up over these next few games to make that decision. But anyway, with all that being said, let's just get into the game and through it for the few people that have gotten to this point or even started watching this video in the first place, which if you have, thank you for doing so. It helps out the channel, but I can't imagine how you could stomach thinking or talking or listening to any more to do with this performance from the Kraken. Though I suppose the one shining light in this game does happen pretty much as the puck gets dropped. The Kraken in those fantastic Winter Classic jerseys that have one of the best memories in Kraken history attached to them of that Winter Classic game against a team in the Wild that they need to beat on the second half of a back-to-back, so you like their chances, especially coming off that fantastic performance against the best team in the NHL by points in the Vancouver Canucks. get off to a great start. The puck drops, they do lose the opening faceoff, but within 30 seconds, they're in the offensive end, set up, cycle the puck, done with a great keep up in the corner, gets it down to Beniers, who gets it to McCann as he circles back up, gets a backhanded pass out to the high point at the blue line, and it's done winding up and firing off a blast at the net that beats Fleury off the post and in to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead 36 seconds into the game, and the crowd absolutely erupts, ready to watch an exciting Kraken game as they are clearly going to dominate the Wild based on this start, with this being the 4th or 5th fastest the Kraken had ever scored to start out a game. And they look like they're going to extend that lead as right off the faceoff, they're back down in the Wild end of the ice, getting a couple more shots off on net, but eventually the Wild get back down to the other end, where McCann gets caught up high by a shoulder, goes down, and would end up leaving the game, at least for a good chunk of this first period. And it's pretty much all downhill from there. Although, now that I think about it, the McCann injury might have happened just after the first goal the Wild score. Either way, they're pretty close to each other in the events that happened here still early on in the first. It's around the 5-minute mark when the Wild get into the Kraken end, get set up, cycle the puck themselves, and eventually it's ex-Kraken Marcus Johansson, who's up by the faceoff dot, fires off a shot on net pretty wide open, but Joey sees the shot coming all the way, and this is one that he really should have. Instead, it leaks through between his blocker and pad, and as he tries to close up, the puck, which I think was still going to deflect wide, ends up getting hit by the end of his stick into the net behind him to tie the game at 1, which obviously is far from ideal, and losing McCann around the same time certainly doesn't help. In fact, I think losing McCann and then having to shuffle the lines, especially with that first line being the one that had that great first shift, really first 2 shifts that got the Kraken on the board and nearly extended the lead, that line turns into a bit of a blender as they try to get somebody to work with that line while McCann is out. Eventually McCann does return, but by the time he returns, the Kraken are on a penalty kill. And for that matter, they're actually on the back half of a penalty kill that was overlapped by a previous penalty, as the Kraken sent the Wild to 5-on-3 for what would have been about a minute and a half, but it doesn't take the Wild that long to score on it. As they end up with the puck behind the Kraken net, it's, I think, Zuccarello passing back and forth behind the Kraken net with Kaprizov on the far side, and eventually, as they go back and forth behind the net, one of the times that it gets to Kaprizov, he sees that Joey's still just enough off his post that he can wrap it around the post and into the net to give the Wild the power play goal and the 2-1 lead. And sure, it's easy enough to look at this and say the Kraken should have sent someone behind the net to break up that pass back and forth, but when you're down 2 guys, you can't afford then to have it be 2-on-3 up above the net. So in a situation like this, it's pretty much just up to the goaltender to have those posts on lockdown and not allow a wraparound chance like this one. It's hard to really put it on Decord considering it is a 5-on-3 situation, but there really isn't another option here to try to defend that better. I mean, I suppose you could put a stick on that post if you're a defenseman next to the net, but that does open up the pass up into the slot a little bit more, and then you still end up with a dangerous chance that way. Obviously, the best option would probably not to be to go to 5-on-3 in the first place, but the Kraken put themselves in that situation and paid the price. Fortunately, they do kill off the rest of the second penalty, then get a power play of their own, and don't really do anything with it to try to get the game back tied up, eventually sending the Wild to another power play late in the first that's going to overlap into the start of the second. And of course, just as that power play is about to end at the start of the second period with the remaining part of it that overlapped into the second, the Wild end up scoring. It's a pass down to Boldy that he just works up into the slot, gets some space, and just puts a backhand shot perfectly into the far top corner. This is one that's kind of hard for Decord to really do anything about. It's just a perfectly placed shot, and a guy that really shouldn't have been given that much space even on the power play right in front of the net. But while it's hard to blame Decord too much for that one, the one that he gives up about a minute later to Kaprizov at 4-on-4 is one that he again really should have. It's on a rush chance, and it is Kaprizov, who's a very talented shooter, but he has a guy right in front of him. It's Borgen that's kind of pinching him off towards the side, so it's still a fairly open pass, but a contested one, and it just beats Decord clean into the back of the net to give the Wild now the 4-1 lead, at which point Decord gets pulled and Grubauer goes in. But regardless of all that, and the fact that a lot of this game even to this point had been played in special teams or at 4-on-4 like this fourth goal for the Wild is, in fact, just over half of this game was played at 5-on-5, which tells you how much special teams there were in this game, as it really got chippy between these two teams. In fact, the reason we're at 4-on-4 in the first place when Kaprizov scores this goal is because immediately after the puck dropped on that Wild power play goal, the Kraken got the puck into the Wild end of the ice, but there were then some extracurriculars around their net that led to the 4-on-4. Kaprizov scores that goal with more open ice, and then Decord gets pulled, so he goes from one of the best days of his life, as he put it, and probably the best game of his career so far in the NHL in the Winter Classic, to now this game, which is easily the worst game of his NHL career so far and probably one of the worst of his professional career, and certainly a day to forget in those same jerseys. And I can say that with some confidence considering it is the first time that he's ever been pulled due mostly to performance from an NHL game. And real quick, as far as Decord's concerned, everyone has these off games. It was bound to happen at some point, especially with the number of games he's been playing for the Kraken, and with all of the great games and wins that he's stolen for the team so far this season. I think he was more than due to have one of these happen and really not think too much of it. Unfortunately, it comes in a game where the Kraken could ill afford to have that type of performance. Either way, Grubauer's in the game at this point, and things really don't get that much better. The Kraken do end up on a power play a few minutes later. They look a little bit better, but not that much. And then right as the power play comes to an end, the Wild are right back down the ice. And of course, because that's how the night was going, the first shot that ends up on net from the Wild while Grubauer's in net ends up past him into the net to give the Wild the 5-1 lead. It was through a bunch of traffic. Still, maybe one that Grubauer could have had if he was against the post a little bit better, but it is the far post, and I don't think he saw the shot coming cleanly, so hard to say. Plus, he doesn't give up another goal the rest of the game, so he ended up having a decent night in the part of it that he played, which was the majority of the game. For the Kraken, though, they really don't get that much better throughout the rest of this period. They end up giving the Wild another power play towards the back half of it, which goes into the third period. I mean, I suppose the Kraken did themselves have a power play just before that, towards the end of the second, which I guess for what it's worth, that power play was a fantastic one from the Kraken. They had the offensive zone for the majority of it, created a lot of pressure, and honestly deserved a score with how well they played on this power play. Just Fleury and net was locked in at that point and not letting the Wild slip away their lead. Even if it was a pretty significant one, we head to the third with the Wild on the power play and leading 5-1. And within a couple minutes, they nearly extend that to 6-1, but Grubauer makes a split save, so makes up for the one that, that's a hard one to really put on him, but if you want to, he still makes up for it with this save. Eventually, towards the middle of the period, the Kraken do get that second goal to make it 5-2, as Eberle from the corner throws the puck up towards the slot where Beniers is waiting to try to get a shot from a dangerous area. The puck never makes it to Beniers, though, as it goes off the skate of a Wild defenseman, and just through a tiny hole that Fleury allows to give Eberle a goal, extending his point streak. McCann, for what it's worth, extended his point streak with an assist in the first goal for Dunway at the very beginning of the game. But for the Kraken, this second goal ends up being too little too late. They do get a power play almost immediately after scoring this goal, so they had a chance to pull to within 2 goals with the 5-3 power play goal if they had gotten one here, but they don't get it. The Wild pretty much ice away the rest of this game, even I think get another power play towards the end of it. Still, things get chippy. Borgen has that fight, which he wins, and the Kraken just kind of fade down the stretch to lose this one 5-2. So then, one more time, in the end for the Kraken, they follow up a great performance against one of the best teams in the NHL at home, against a team that they need to beat in this wild card race, who's on the second half of a back-to-back while wearing jerseys that we only had great memories attached to in those Winter Classics, and lay a complete egg, tainting those jerseys. Decord has the worst game of his NHL career, and the Kraken lose 2 points, basically a 4-point swing if the Kraken had won this game versus the Wild winning it in that wildcard race, with the Wild, who are one of those teams that they need to be passing, and now will have to pass if they want to get into the playoffs. Beyond that, though, I really don't know what more there is to say about this game, and honestly, I don't really want to spend that much more time on it. I still have to edit this video to relive it that one more time. I guess there's also the fact that the Kraken, who were fantastic in special teams over these last 3 games since really struggling for most of the season, play most of the game in special teams, or at least a very significant chunk of it in special teams, and end up a -2 in that area, so right back to somewhat terrible special teams. Again, they did have that one power play that looked fantastic and probably deserved to score, and play enough power plays like that, you'll probably score more often than not. Meanwhile, for the penalty kill, they do give up 2 power play goals for the Wild, and sure, one of them's at 5-on-3, and that's not one that you're likely to come out on the better end of more often than not. But the second one is still a power play goal at the start of a period where they had to start from center ice, which gives you extra time to kill off. Not only that, but the power play was shorter because you'd already killed off some of it to get to the start of the period in the first place. Not a great night for special teams. With that, though, let's finish things out with the Kraken 3 stars. I do think there's a couple of players worth mentioning here. As always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide whether or not there are 3 stars for the Kraken after every one of their games, or who they are after games like the one against the Canucks, you can help support the channel a little bit more than you already are by watching the video to this point. And if you are, again, I don't know how, but thank you very much. Even if you're a Wild fan, thank you, and that's probably how you made it to this point. Still, if you want to help support the channel a little bit more, you can go to the link down below to Patreon and support over there. As for the 3 stars, one guy who didn't get on the scoring sheet and hasn't been getting on the scoring sheet very much since his return, but still had a fantastic game, I think, for the Kraken, and really deserved to have at least one goal and maybe a couple of points based on how he played in this one, especially in the offensive end, would be Andrei Burakovsky. He's going to get my first star in this game. I don't know that he really had a great game at the other end of the ice, but no one on the Kraken did, and he certainly gave them a chance in the offensive end, even if the extra little bit of finish didn't work out for him in this game. The way he's playing, he's going to get on the scoreboard pretty soon here, and then the floodgates hopefully will just open. The Kraken could really use that extra scoring right now. Past that, I mean, both Dunn and McCann did have pretty good games. This really doesn't feel like a game where I can give 3 stars out, though. Oh, what the heck. I guess we can have at least one bit of positivity and try to get some optimism going through the rest of the season. At least try and get some good vibes going the Kraken way for whatever little bit that might help the energy for the team throughout the rest of the season and these next 2 very important weeks, whether or not the rest of the season matters beyond that. So, yeah, we'll go McCann 2nd star for getting the goal or getting the assist to extend his point streak to 7 games, and then battling back from getting hit up high with no call on the play, by the way. The officials, even with a lot of work, did not get off to a good start. They do not call that hit on McCann. Fortunately, he wasn't injured long term. He still comes back to the game and played pretty well the rest of it, and then Dunn does get the goal to start things out and played pretty well the rest of the game on top of that. He played quite a bit in this game. So yeah, we'll go Burakovsky 1, McCann 2, Dunn 3, and for the Kraken, well, it was generous of me to give them 3 stars. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Patreon didn't really have anything to say, and I can't blame them for not wanting to relive this game or think any more past it once that final horn went or whenever you turned off the TV. With that said, though, if you have made it to this point, thank you once again very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy the video, the buttons for that stuff down below that helps support the channel. We'll be back for power rankings tomorrow on Monday. I'll be recording them Sunday night, and then, yeah. Otherwise, hopefully the Kraken play better against the Bruins, and until then, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.